Today, I'm sharing my journey of why I became a Scrum Master and how I reached the point of getting the job. My journey is a little bit different than most people when it comes to becoming a Scrum Master. In fact, when I transitioned into the role, I didn't actually have the intentions of becoming a Scrum Master, and I didn't realize that it was something that I would become so passionate about. Going back to the very beginning, I knew that I wanted to be in IT, but when you go into IT, there are so many different areas that you can go into. For instance, you could be a developer and need to know programming. You could be a business analyst where you're in between finding out what the business needs and explaining that to the development team. You can do project management, you can do infrastructure. I mean, the list is pretty much endless in terms of positions that you could have in IT. So when I came out of college, I had an IT degree and it was mainly around development. And I was actually a terrible developer. So that is the number one role I would never want to go into. I admire people that can code, but it's just not for me. So I luckily went through a rotational program when I first came out of college, and that gave me the opportunity to try three different positions. And I started as a software tester. I did that for a year and a half. I was also a traditional project manager doing waterfall projects where, just to give you a quick explanation of waterfall, basically the projects I worked on, they didn't move very quickly. We had these long project plans and we would try to predict within, say, a few months or within a year how long it would take us to deliver things. And my third position, I did a little bit of development, but it transitioned more into like a system analyst role where I was able to explain or document what was needed to developers and helped facilitate a lot of meetings. And I went into a lot of different IT positions. I won't cover all of them because I think you get the idea. I just didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do. And really, I landed on the business analyst position. That was my favorite before becoming a Scrum Master because I didn't have to be super technical. And I loved being able to translate what people from the business or users needed and being able to facilitate those discussions, document it, and help explain that to the developers so that could be put into, say, a website or some type of application. And really, when I got into Scrum so it was back in 2012. Through that rotational program, I had the opportunity to go for a free certification. And I was like, I'm going to go for the certified Scrum Master role or certificate because I just wanted to learn more about it. Not that I necessarily wanted to be a Scrum Master. And I did the certification, I did a 2-day course, and it made so much more sense than trying to learn it from random people. I had been trying to learn more about it in little bits and pieces over the years. So I did the training, I really loved it. And from there, I was like, okay, I have this knowledge, maybe I can use it in the future, and continued working on projects that were waterfall. They were very slow moving. And pretty much I continued as a business analyst. And I had most Scrum Masters don't have the fortune that someone is going to come up to you and say, hey, will you do this role in a full-time position? I didn't actually have the title, but basically my manager said, hey, you went for this training. Things are really slow moving on this project you've been working on. We delivered it after a year. I think they spent $1 million, and it turned out that that wasn't at all what the customer wanted. So we pretty much had to redo it. And the strategy was, hey, let's get a Scrum Master in there. Let's do this from a Scrum perspective and try to release things, in 2 week or maybe it was 4 week increments instead of working on it for a year and then discovering that it was something that nobody wanted or could use. So yeah, my manager said, hey, would you be interested in facilitating as a Scrum Master, helping the whole team and organization transition from waterfall to agile Scrum? And I said, of course, great opportunity. And that was where I got my start, and I really fell in love with it. Never thought I would have gotten into it because in some ways I thought maybe it was more like project management, and I really disliked project management because I felt like it was more of a micromanagement approach. There wasn't a whole lot of transparency, and it just wasn't for me. But the Scrum Master role was completely different. So as far as tips that I would give you to try to become a Scrum Master, and based off of what I did in order to land the role, the first thing that I would recommend is you want to learn what is Scrum, what is Agile. When you start with the basics, you can at least know what is the purpose of using Scrum, being able to understand it yourself. And if you want to be a Scrum Master, you're going to need to be able to explain it to other people and coach people on it. So that's really the first step, is understand the basics. And there are so many ways that you can do this. I have a Scrum 101 Basics course that's coming out in April, which you can take, but there are other ways as well. You can look for free trainings on YouTube. You can go to scrumguides.org and you can study the Scrum Guide, but really just get yourself very familiar with Scrum and Agile. And then the next step after that is being able to practice. So for me, I really was practicing being a Scrum Master before my manager came to me. The way that I was practicing this was trying to find creative ways to use Scrum, using like the different tools, actually using the mindset. So for instance, I had some side projects I was working on at work, and we would typically, whenever I had a side project, we would use Scrum. We would typically use Jira, which is the #1 tool used for facilitating, for having all of your user stories and such in there for Scrum. So I used the tool that helped me learn that. Where possible, we were doing the daily Scrum, so we could have our touch point every day to see how we were reaching our goal. We would create user stories. We basically doing anything you possibly can that mimics a Scrum, working on a Scrum product. Do that in your real life. And for you, that could be something as simple as, say, for instance, you have a vacation that's coming up. Try to get your family together or whoever's attending and run it as if this is a Scrum product. That means you can use Jira or maybe something free like, well, actually Jira has free instances. You could use Trello. You could even put it on a wall. You can use sticky notes, but try to use the different types of tools. Try to have an agile mindset where you are, inspecting how things are going every week or every 2 weeks and then making changes. So practice is a big part of it. It will help you build your confidence and it will make it easier for you to transition into that full-time role. The other thing that I want to cover is, so many people think that the most important part about becoming Scrum Master or landing the role is, you have to be an absolute expert at Scrum and knowing everything. Okay, yes, you want to know about Scrum, you want to understand all the basics, but the biggest part about being a Scrum Master is not going in and being some guru, knowing every single answer to Scrum or having even completed the certification or exam. It's not about nailing those types of questions. Most times it comes down to the soft skills. The reason I say this is I know Scrum Masters that have 5 or more certificates, and I hate to say it, but some of them are the worst Scrum Masters that I've worked with because, not for lack of trying, but if you're focused so much on Scrum and what the Scrum Guide says, but you don't have the ability to coach, you don't have the curiosity to try to learn about the product, or you're not good at relationship building, all of those soft skills are just as important, if not more important, than knowing everything about Scrum. If I were hiring someone and I had to choose between someone who had a ton of certificates on Scrum and knew everything about Scrum, but they didn't have any of the soft skills, or I could choose someone who maybe knew a little bit about Scrum and they had really amazing soft skills, such as they could coach, they could train people, they were really good with communication, all of the different skills that are involved in being a Scrum Master, I would definitely choose the latter over someone who has all of this crazy Scrum knowledge. So definitely work on that. Hopefully, if you are watching this video, you're someone who already has these soft skills. You might already be someone who's coached people, whether it's on a sports team or maybe even in your day-to-day role. For instance, are you a nurse and you're like a team lead? You might not think about it in terms of Scrum, but those are easy skills that you can transition from a job that you're in now to being in a Scrum Master. The last thing and most important, one of the most important, I should say, is landing the job, a lot of times it doesn't come down to applying for a million jobs or being the most amazing, most knowledgeable Scrum Master. You know every single acronym in the world with Scrum. If you want to get the job, it's going to come down to networking. And when I say networking, that means really taking advantage of people that are already in your network, um, creating new connections, whether that's through LinkedIn or meetup groups. There's so many ways that you can build your network. But I want to say most of the jobs that I've landed, whether it's been a Scrum Master job or something else, it hasn't been me going out and applying for jobs on job boards. It's actually been from me networking with someone. So say, quite a few jobs, I've had people that I worked with in the past. I was totally happy in my current job. And then someone would reach out and say, hey, this position opened up. Are you interested? Or if it's me actively searching, I might reach out to a former manager, or for instance, you're going to reach out to someone that's related to, they're in an IT role or something that relates to Scrum. You can reach out to them and ask if they know of any positions available. You're really going to increase your odds of getting the Scrum Master job if you are actively networking versus just applying for jobs or just waiting for something to happen. So those are my biggest tips on how to land the Scrum Master role, what you want to do from start to finish. And that's really my background in terms of how I found out about Scrum, why I got into it, and how I got my first job as a Scrum Master. I hope this was helpful. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. And thanks so much for watching this video.